match for Frances?
I think she's a perfect match for Frances because they both have this unleashed ambition that they will support in one another no matter.
And do you think that's a common thing in Washington? You get wives with as much ambition as the husbands as you would do in any other kind of profession?
I don't know anything about DC, thankfully, because I think I'd be up with nightmares. So instead I thought, let's just delve into the drama instead on television instead of the reality.
And what was it like working with Kevin?
Kevin's great. We worked together about 18 years ago on a movie, but we only had one scene together. And we've been waiting this long to work with each other, running into each other at parties and such. And he's one of the most consummate professionals. He's such a pro, in addition to a true thespian. And to be on the set, not only is he the star of the show, he's a producer and he oversees everything. And he's a collaborator. So we get to work together, truly together, and help rewrite scenes with Beau Willimon, who's the head writer. And it's a team. And Fincher is sort of like Oz. You know, he's always out there. You can feel him and you can hear him. Maybe he's on a PA system. I'm not sure. But it's a good team.
I like the idea of him behind
right behind
curtain with a
I am David Fincher.
And the character is immaculately dressed. You know, that's part of who she is,
Yeah.
kind of her battle face. So did you have any input in her look at all?
No, David and I spoke about that at length. Being, you know, the Lady Macbeth template, in essence, to be a marble piece. And life starts to chip, and the human starts to erode. So you don't know a thing about Claire Underwood. You don't have any sense of her family, her background, her history, really. There's no association with anyone in the show other than her husband. And therefore we have so far to go. So far to go in season 1 and 2.
Do you think it'll just be a 2-season thing?
I don't know. That's what we have so far.
I know obviously it's on Netflix, so they release all the series at the same time so you can get completely addicted. Is that the kind of way that you watch television as well?
I've never watched TV. I still don't today. I watch CNN sometimes. This is new, this medium, but being educated, this is what the people want. Being engaged with the character's plot arc. They don't want to be left hanging, you know, until the next to be continued. People buy box sets of shows, I hear, and they're notorious for sitting in bed with the computer over a weekend. I watched, 3 seasons of Mad Men in one sitting, and you think, well, you don't have to go to the store to buy the box set. You don't have to pay for each box set. You're a member of Netflix. You just download all 13 episodes of season 1 in one go. And that's what the people want. Give it to them.
I think this show is going to be one of those addictive shows as well.
Yeah.
I've only watched 2 already, and I'm really.
It's the drug. It's your new drug. House of Cards, the new drug.
2 final questions. What politician has always fascinated you? You don't have to be a fan of theirs, but is there someone that has always intrigued you?
I never, again, followed politics, but, there's enigmatic and there's true theater with politicians. And when the combination is working, it's a beautiful recipe. Bill Clinton being one of them, where he could, the way he marries the two. And he's got a genius mind. There are many actors that are beautiful politicians with theater. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter what arena you're in. I think politics are everywhere.
And final question, have you been to Washington?
Yes.
What's it like when you're not anything involved in it?
Washington, D.C. is almost more scandalous than Hollywood, if you can imagine. You can feel the vibe.
And the place when you've been there?
I thought you were going, is it really? Like, oh my God, DC.
That's all right. Yeah, if I can just get you to take it again, there's something, noise came down. So yeah. Yeah, what's it like as a kind of place? Have you been there a lot, or? I mean, I've only ever seen it on the news. It looks like...
Oh, really?
Yeah, it kind of looks very theatrical, even just from
It
the
is
outside.
very theatrical. I mean, it's you know, our founding fathers built the Constitution. You feel the history of the United States of America, most definitely. You are surrounded by the monuments. You know, from Abe Lincoln to, you know, FDR and Roosevelt. I think it's our landscape of what built the laws and the tenets of, but what lives inside of it, or who's running it, is very much like Hollywood.
That's perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's lovely.
Robin, you can stay there. I'm just going to check and see where GA are.
Yeah. So, two my right questions. Did you do any kind of research on the kind of journalists that work in Washington?
No, I didn't. I didn't meet with any, reporters or anything like that. We spent a few weeks before we started shooting with, David Fincher and Kevin and basically the whole cast, just talking about the characters and where our sort of paths lead us, and so it was sort of enough research that the scripts were enough. They were so full, which is helpful.
And what I like about your character as well is she's also ambitious, like Frances. So they've kind of got that in common. Obviously, I've only seen the 2 episodes, but I've seen the old series. So obviously, they're also different as well. So how much do you think the show is about kind of ambition?
I think the show is a lot about power, and certainly I think the relationship between Zoe and Frances, I think there's a respect between the two of them. He probably sees a little bit of himself in her, and she respects people with power and with confidence. So I think that's sort of where the relationship starts, and then of course it becomes more and more dangerous as the series goes on.
And kind of sexy it looks from the trailers.
I hope so.
What was it like working with Kevin?
Kevin's amazing. I mean, obviously I'd been a huge fan of his before, and then getting to work with him for such a long time. I mean, we worked for about 7 months on the show, and it was just really fulfilling. I mean, you really have to be prepared to work with someone like that, because he does his homework, and if you don't show up ready to really play and work off of this person, then you'll just get stompled all over. But he's amazing and really, really fun.
Excellent. 2 questions that I'm asking everyone. Is there a politician that's always fascinated you? You don't obviously have to be a fan of their policies, but is there a politician that you've always kind of been interested in?
I am so not a political person or interested in politics in any way, so I wouldn't really be able to answer that question probably in an interesting way. I mean, someone that's not real, I'd certainly be interested in watching Francis Underwood's choices in his career, because he's a fascinating person, even though he's sort of evil.
It's interesting. Robin said similar. She's like, I keep well away from politics.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you don't. The thing about the show, though, that I think is amazing is you don't have to be a fan of politics, because it's not just about politics in the workplace. It's also about politics at home, in relationships, and the power struggle that we all go through.
And have you been to Washington?
I've been to Washington. Yeah, we only shot a couple things there. Everything else was shot in Baltimore.
What's it actually like if you're not involved in the world that is there? What's it like to be there?
Well, the thing about the show, I think, is that it could take place anywhere. It just happens to take place in Washington. But if you're not from there, if you've never been there, it doesn't feel like this other world, I don't think.
Really? It's one of those places that I've always seen on TV. I mean, I don't even know the layout, but I see a monument and I know exactly where it is. It's like one of those, because it's one of the most filmed places.
Of course. Yeah, no, I haven't really spent very much time there. I shot something else there as well a few years ago, but yeah, I don't know the city at all.
Okay, cool. And obviously your character is dealing with the kind of Twitter generation of politics. Are you a fan of Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Twitter is such an amazing way of finding out news really quickly. If you're following like the right sites and things, not just politics, but movie news and all sorts of. It's also just a fun way of getting sort of like the pop culture updates. But yeah, I find it saves a lot of time. I also waste a lot of time on Twitter, I have to admit. But yeah, I do think it's a really smart way of keeping updated on what's going on in the world.
And final question: do you find it interesting to be able to kind of be your own publicist on there as well? Like if something's wrong, you can correct it. You can. I
mean, yeah, I think one of the smart things about the Twitter world is it seemed, well, I was never on Facebook or anything like that, so I haven't had the experience with that sort of thing. But I do think it's smart that it gives people the opportunity to put things out there that they're willing to share rather than somebody else doing it for them. There's a lot of power in that.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we switching rooms or?
Next one is Kevin, right?
And that's sort of a bit haphazard.
Yeah, I was explaining to Yossi because he's a news cameraman, so doesn't usually do. And I was like, yeah, normally they're trapped in a room all day and not allowed to move. So, what was the attraction for you with
David Fincher. Hands down, David Fincher. Working with him all those years ago on Seven, I only worked about 14 days on that film, so I didn't get enough of him. And then I produced Social Network, and when we were talking about wanting to do something together when we were on the set, and I think Eli Roth had suggested, someone had talked about the idea of rebooting House of Cards, so David watched it and then I watched it, and then we were both like, yeah, actually this kind of feels like it would translate. And here we are 3.5 years later.
I loved it. I really loved it. I'm already addicted. I'm only 2 in. I loved the old series as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was a brilliant series, and I was sort of nervous last night because when we had the premiere here in London, it's the first time I've watched it with an audience. It was a British audience, and I was like, boy, if we don't win over the British crowd, it doesn't matter who we win over after this, because it's really your series. It's beloved, and I was really excited last night to hear all my British friends say we didn't blow it, and that they were really engaged with it.
Oh, I did. I loved it. The character himself, Francis. I spoke to Robin earlier, and she described her character as being a bit Lady Macbeth. Do you think that's the kind of Shakespeare parallel?
Oh, he doesn't have a bone in his body like Macbeth. Macbeth hesitates, doesn't want to do it. That's not Francis. Francis is, well, Michael Dobbs really says that he based him partly on Richard III, partly on Iago, which is why the direct address was utilized in the series. And look, I'm very lucky because I just played Richard III last year, so I've been able to apply the applicable parts of that. But no, there's no Macbeth. But she is Lady Macbeth, yes, definitely.
It's like we've picked out different characters and put them all together.
Yeah.
I love the direct address. I think that's what spoke to me about the series the first time round. What's it like to do that? Is it refreshing to be able to turn and address the camera?
It took me a while. Well, it took me a while to to make the adjustment from the experience of doing Richard III, where I was looking into audiences' eyes and looking into people's eyes all over the world and seeing how they loved that. You know, I could see them leaning forward in their seats, and they loved being co-conspirators and feeling that they were getting something no one else was getting. But it's different than when I'm on set and I'm only looking down the barrel of a lens. And ultimately, I kind of had to rethink it, that instead of it being what the experience was in Richard III, which was talking to lots of people, it's sort of like I'm talking to my best friend. It's like when you're sitting in a restaurant and, you know, someone you know walks in and you sent them an email and they didn't email you back, and you go, watch, she's going to come over and she's going to say, hi, oh, I did get your email, but I didn't. And you look at your friend. They know what's going on, and it feels a little bit like that I'm sharing things with the audience that Francis doesn't share with anyone else, not even his wife. It is at his most private, and that's pretty interesting. And you know, I've loved movies that have broken the fourth wall, and obviously there's Olivier's Richard III, but lest we forget Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, it's one of the great fourth walls ever.
I love them. I don't know why. Like you said, I feel like your character is confessing to me. It does. It makes you feel really special watching it. Do you think politics can survive without sex and corruption?
Doesn't seem to be. I mean, you know, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Those things seem to be true. We constantly are being reminded of that when people crash and burn and make mistakes or send photos of themselves on Twitter or whatever it is that brings people down. But also I think audiences and obviously filmmakers have been fascinated by exploring and investigating politics. I mean, you know, what I like about what we've tried to do is that there's a complexity to it, there's a modern feeling to it. It feels quite real and now, 21st century. In some ways, nothing has changed in the 22 or 23 years since the original series. In some ways, things have changed dramatically. And I think we're trying to sort of straddle that line of both, in a sense, paying homage to the original in terms of the sort of diabolicalness of it, but also making it feel like politics these days is about chess moves. So it's felt like I've been playing 13 hours of chess.
Yeah, the Twitter is completely different. I don't have anything like that. I've got two more quick questions. What politician has always fascinated you? It doesn't have to be someone that you admire politically, but who's fascinated you?
Mandela. I had the chance to meet him and spend some time with him and watch him. And I have never seen someone who was a better fundraiser. Because I think maybe in some way he knew people saw him as a kind of angel. You know, he was this. And so, you know, he wouldn't let him leave the room until they wrote the check. And he was very smart about that. And I think Bobby Kennedy is, to me, a very extraordinary story of a man who, for everything you can read about him and everything, and I knew some people that knew him and talked about him, that here's a man who for years had a reputation as being an absolute bastard. Ruthless was a word constantly used. And after his brother's death, when he was no longer working on behalf of his brother, which is what he'd always done, where suddenly he was alone and had to represent himself, the change he went through, the incredible journey to become a better man was a pretty remarkable journey. And I think that story has always been a very interesting story to me.
And final question, I've never been to Washington. What's it actually like?
I've been to Washington on some levels because I've worked for politicians, so I've done like campaigns and tried to help raise money. I've also done 6 plays in Washington, D.C. So I actually have more experience as an actor working at the Kennedy Center, working at the National Theater, working at the Barter Theater. My memories of Washington are all tied to plays that I've done there for long periods of time, not so much the politics.
Does it feel like there's a place, when you're not working in politics there, does it feel like it's all going on?
Well, you know, you can't help but look around, and there's the Washington Monument, there's Lincoln Chair, and, you know, it's you're surrounded by it.
That's lovely, thank you.
Thanks.
It's one of those places, I think if someone dropped me there, I might be able to work out I was in Washington. You know, from all the monuments
Thank you very much.
that I've seen on telly, all the political progress.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much.
You
I
bet.
loved it.
Thanks.